Hello and welcome to this new episode of Upclose with Upword. Today we have our guest Kausik Gangopadhyay. He is a professor of economics at Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode, and he is the author of this new book, The Majoritarian Myth, How Unscientific Social Theories Create Disharmony. Kausik has been a long-time contributor to our magazine Pragyata, but this is the first time that we have the privilege of having him on Upword. Welcome to Upword, Kausik, and I'm so glad you're here. Tell us first how the book is doing.
Book has been launched.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is still...
I would always hope it would do better than what it is doing now.
Right. Right. So we'll start straight away with the main topic, which is, of course, the book. I'll start with the title itself. So, The Majoritarian Myth, How Unscientific Social Theories Create Disharmony. So, a lot of keywords there. First, tell us about the Majoritarian Myth, what it is.
Okay. Basically, this comes from social sciences in the liberal arts departments and humanities. So this idea actually started with Gramsci, a very celebrated Marxist thinker from Italy, and the Frankfurt School, again a group of Marxist thinkers. So they like to consider the society as sort of a struggle between different classes. So the biggest class is the majority, and the smaller ones are the minorities or different minorities, right? So the idea is the bigger one is always oppressing the smaller one, because the minorities are always being oppressed, so they give you fancy terms like structural violence and all these kind of things. So therefore the minority are kind of cornered, and therefore basically any violence against the minority has to be magnified. I mean, if we first hear about it, it looks sort of like intuitive, right? Because they are always getting oppressed. So, of course, their violence is a big problem for them. And on the other hand, if the minorities, they do something against the majority, well, this might create kind of ill will, malcontent against them, right? And therefore, it has to be sort of ignored. So that is so they call majoritarianism is, in the dictionary wise, it is basically the society is run according to the wishes of the majority, and it goes against the minority because it is done by the majority. It goes against the minority synonymously. So they call it this idea majoritarianism. Therefore, the countermeasures they call it the counter majoritarianism.
Right.
But I am referring broadly this idea as majoritarianism,
right.
Majoritarian myth in this book.
So the subtitle, the other part of the cover is How Unscientific Social Theories Create Disharmony. So, two questions here, interrelated. One is how is the majoritarian myth unscientific? And two, don't all social theories fall into that category in some sense, including yours maybe?
That's a very good question. Now, how majoritarian myth is unscientific, one needs to read the book. This is the demonstration. So, what I would say that all social theories, and in fact all theories, they are in varying degrees of scientificity, right? So, I give an example from the pure sciences. If you see the Newton's gravitation, right, theory of gravity, it was a theory, it was a scientific theory, right? It was not very unscientific even today, but it is unscientific compared to Einstein's theory of relativity. So there actually we have this Newton's theory. I mean, if I don't know whether your audience would approve me showing you formulas, but basically it is capital G M M by d square.
Right.
Now this d square, it is actually an approximation. In Einstein, it is 2.000016, something like that. So I am showing that majoritarianism is an extremely unscientific theory that doesn't do well even compared to my theory.
Right.
And of course, I am sure in future there will be better theories that will overshadow my theory as well.
Right.
But the problem is their unscientificity is not actually the part that they are unscientific. Their unscientificity lies in the part that they don't want to change it at all. They say this is right.
So it has in some sense become a power play.
It is a power play.
So therefore it is more cynical that way. That
I'll tell you a short story. I have sent the link of my book to all my liberal and communist friends. And some of them definitely said, I will give credit to where it is due. That way we'll read it and we'll let you know. And I know some of them are reading it also. One of my liberal friend, just after I sent it, he didn't do anything about the book. He just saw the title page, this cover. And then he said that I don't read trash. He sent it, so they are recorded. Yeah. So this is the unscientific, right? He didn't care to bother read the book or anything about the book. Just because the title doesn't look good to him, he threw it away. That is unscientific about it.
Right. And that kind of is a very common behavior, I think, even on the social media. We see that, we've had a long run of this. Now I think it is at the fag end of that graph where people don't really debate any longer on social media. But in the
earlier age, yeah.
10 years ago, there was a lot of healthy debates going on
in Twitter. It was a lovely place.
Twitter and even Facebook. And often the people who would actually slam the door shut in your face or unfriend you, block you, or even stop talking to you in real life would self-identify as liberals. So that is the most glaring paradox of
our times.
Yeah.
Now I'll tell you something on this. I don't know. I can't stop myself from saying this. So you see, I live in a circle where a lot of people, I don't know, maybe the majority, they are the liberals.
Right.
So often this idea of polarization comes, in the talk and other things. Immediately it comes. Sometimes they are polite looking at me, but other times it kind of comes out. It is the Hindu nationalism, Hindutva, that is doing all the polarization. Now I have this problem. I just don't take the words really on there as a polite gesture.
Right.
I try to take them very seriously. Okay, I agree. Now let's take it very seriously. Hindutva is doing all the problems, right? Now let's go to America. Bigger polarization is happening compared to India, right?
Yeah.
It's a much more homogeneous place still. More polarization is happening. No Hindu nationalism, right? So who is doing it? They would say, well, fundamentalist Christianity or whatever it is, right wing. I don't think there is a revival of Christianity in America. There is a revival of Hindutva in India, but that's not the case there, right? But let's give them this benefit of doubt. Okay, let's assume in America Christianity is going on. That's why the polarization is happening, right? Okay, let's come to Netherlands. Again, there's a massive polarization going on, right? And then here, most people, in the census, it is 55% or so, self-identified themselves as atheists and having no religion. There also big polarization is going on. So one thing is constant in all these three places. It is the liberal theories that are taught in all the universities and colleges. Doesn't it make it the obvious target of the polarization?
Right. So in that sense, liberalism is actually driving polarization and driving society apart.
There are examples, many examples.
So which is basically opposed to the very idea of classical liberalism. Would you say that?
That is true. So classical liberalism, we kind of dates back to John Locke, right? And so John Locke, this idea comes from Protestant Christianity. But this idea actually gives you liberty, and that actually, in some sense, it protects your individuality, right? Now, this left liberalism, it actually doesn't come from liberalism per se. It actually comes from the Marxism. The liberals, they used to be called cultural Marxists, and they don't like it, and that's why they erase the term from Wikipedia. They cancel that part. But it is actually factually true. Because the harbingers of this liberalism, it started in Harvard, and some people like Herbert Marcuse and they actually came from Germany. So this Frankfurt School, which I talked about, it was basically Marxism in a cultural domain, cultural milieu, cultural base, matrix, right? And then from this, these people, many of them are Jewish. I think most of them probably were Jewish, right? They were the most advanced thinkers. Now Nazism came and drove them away, and they left. Now Einstein went to Princeton, but these people landed up in Harvard, and they started the social theories there.
Okay.
They call themselves liberal to demarcate them from communism. But the underlying social theory is same. Right. Marx applied in the economic dimension, they applied in the social or cultural dimension.
Right. But are those theories of cultural Marxism so widespread and prevalent that they've caused such a massive impact on the world politics today?
Definitely. I'll give you an example. Okay, let's go to 7 October, right, 2023. Hamas struck, right, Israel. Maybe 1,500 people died. It's a brutality, right? I mean, these atrocities are unspeakable, right? But if you look at America, particularly the Ivy League campuses, there is jubilation. And these people are not Arabs. These people are Americans, white skin or whatever you call it, but they are liberals. They are liberals, right? Where they are jubilant. And so just I mind you, this is right after 7th October. This is not, and this is before 9th October 2023 when Israel did the counter strike. I see a lot of nuances. If you don't support Israel in the counter strike, I mean, I'm okay with it. I mean, in some sense that I see the nuances all right. But before 9th October, there is no way you can condemn Israel and you can support Hamas. I don't see that is a fair position by any right, by any means. And there are jubilations. I saw one liberal professor in an Ivy League university, perhaps Cornell, and he was saying this cultural Marxist liberal things. He was saying, well, there's a lot of structural violence against Hamas and Arabs, and Hamas did a counter strike. So they leveled the field. They leveled the field. They leveled the violence. So he is justifying hundreds of innocent civilians died, and he is justifying that, right? This is what the liberalism does. And we have seen that also in this testimony, right, by Claudine Gay, the Harvard president, right? There's a call for genocide of the Jews. And this person said, well, this is the freedom of speech. Now, it is ironic because Harvard usually cancel anyone who goes against their policy. In fact, there's a list of FOE, freedom of expression, how it is violated in universities. And Harvard actually figures in the top. I mean, they are the most violator of freedom of speech. They cancel anyone who does not do a proper pronoun. Some person who is a trans woman, if you call he for the person, then that person will be cancelled, right? So this is kind of their level of freedom of speech. But genocide, they are all right with it, because and it is. You might say it's on Claudine Gay, but 600 academicians from Harvard, they signed in favor of Claudine Gay.
Right.
Why? Because they teach the same theories in the classroom in a much more nuanced way. But that's what the baseline of the theories.
Right. So, if we were to take an analogy, I think you have given the analogy of, in the video also you spoke about the bigger vehicle and the smaller vehicle accident, and there is a tendency or a pattern to always blame the bigger vehicle. That is what majoritarianism is. And if you were to use another analogy, when you say structural violence, that is what they blame on. So, do they mean to say that a society in its normal functioning, peaceful times, is basically at the receiving end of some latent violence, like latent heat you have in physics? So there is some latent violence which is happening, which is not detected anywhere, which is always against the minority. And whenever there is violence, it is always in opposition to that violence. Is that what they say?
That is what exactly, precisely.
So in that way, the minority is never going to be in the wrong.
Right? They never can be wrong. They can never be the wrong.
So that is what, that is the main point that you attack in this book, right? That this is, so I mean, attack may be a stronger word, but what you critique in this book is this fundamental assumption that the minority can never be wrong.
That is correct. And I can also tell you something. So when Gramsci and other people thought about having this vision, It's not really, they have really love for minority culture or anything like that. They were not they had sort of hated the prevalent Christian culture in Europe. And they said that this culture is bad, so whoever is against the culture is kind of sort of good.
Right.
So, I mean, I would not say that, you see, no position in the world, I mean, almost no position in the world can be 100% wrong. But the idea of scientificity is that it has to be sufficiently large to universalize it as a theory.
How long back did Gramsci, when was he there? When was he alive?
So he was born in 1891.
Okay.
He went to jail in 1920s, and he died in 1937, if I'm not correct.
But I suppose the idea of majoritarianism would go back further to the Congress of Vienna, right? We've done a video also on
that. Is
Upword
correct, on the Jews and other things.
Right.
But then there's a problem, there's a issue there. You see, the idea of the majority can be wrong. This goes back not to Vienna, it goes back to Plato.
Okay.
Plato said it. So there's a shift going on, right? I mean, like aircraft is the premier technology now. That time a ship is the premier technology. Suppose the ship is in distress. Would you listen to the majority, the sailors, or would you listen to these people who know the thing?
Right.
And he's saying, okay, we have to believe in the person who is actually sort of like
who is in charge,
who knows the domain knowledge and something like that, right? So that majority is also talked by Tocqueville, a French diplomat, when he visited America in 19th century, I think 1835 or so. So, but that majority is not defined by cultural identity. That is identified by the amount of knowledge or domain expertise they have, right? So the idea, as you have rightly said, in the Vienna, they talked about the Jews. So again, this idea again stems from the idea of Christendom, right? The Europe is supposed to be a Christendom, and there's a big fight that went on. And eventually, in the Westphalian treaties, they sort of, went for the nationhood. So they say, okay, nations are kind of sovereign. We don't need to go for an unified Christendom. But the Jews became a very tricky question because they don't have any nation with them, right? So it is sort of understood that the Jews has to be given some position in the Europe's place. And that's why the idea of the minority kind of came in. It is not impossible that when these Frankfurt school people, they talked about minority, they thought in exclusive Jewish sense. They never thought it in a very universal sense for the across the globe.
Right. I think a lot of the current political dogmas and the received wisdom of the day that we suffer under comes from that period, and a lot of the things that were specific to the time and place then got universalized and exported via colonialism, and people and cultures that had nothing to do with those circumstances are still suffering and bearing the brunt of those.
That exports. Is my book, yes.
Absolutely. So in your book, you also talk about the weaponization of victimhood, and one of the things that you just mentioned was the 7th October, the Palestine-Israel conflict. And Palestinians, if I may take the liberty of saying so, are the masters of this game, right? So tell us something about how victimhood is weaponized and how does this serve the majoritarian myth?
Okay. So the idea is basically whenever some attack happens by the majority on a minority, it is sort of magnified, right? So in my book, I have collected the global media reports, right? And I have shown, I've done it for 3 years, 2020 to 22, 1st January 20 to 31st December 2022. So basically, I have shown that in the global media, the majoritarianism, it is occurring so many times. 1/5 of the cases, approximately, I could identify the pertinent majority or the relevant majority from the context. And 80%, more than 80% of the time, it is the Hindus of India.
Wow. Okay.
Second.
So you are saying any report that we get on this topic.
Global media.
Global media.
Not Indian media.
So 80% of the time they are talking about India and Hindus.
As a majoritarian
community. In that context, of course.
Doing injustice, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Second, that is also surprising. Second is the Sinhalese, Buddhist Sinhalese. That is again another 7%. Third is whites of America. That is
Okay.
2%, 2.2% or so.
Okay. So why this obsession with Hindus?
Well, that is the book, but basically, of course, we understand the disproportionateness of this claim.
That the Hindus constitute roughly about what? 1/7?
15%, yes.
15%?
14, 15%.
And 15% of the world's population is
70%.
represented 80% of the times in such reports.
Such reports.
Wow.
As villains.
Right, of course. Yeah. Okay.
And I mind you, almost India's population is over a billion, right? 1.4 billion. Over a billion people live in countries with classical Sharia laws that does not approve building of places of worship even. Forget about any attack or anything. Just doesn't approve of the, that kind of making of a temple or church.
Right.
They are exempted.
Right. No, so coming back to the weaponization of victimhood, could you give me specific examples of how that happens? Victimhood, how is victimhood being weaponized?
So basically the idea is a psychological theory.
Okay.
It is called microaggression. Microaggression, the idea is basically you show yourself as a victim, so people have a lot of sympathy for you and you jump on to conquer this whoever is in position, right? So it actually, I mean, if you see the history, it actually happened with political Christianity. So the recurrent myth is that Christians were very much victims, right? In pagan Rome, right? So a lot of stories and everything. And this Harari said is very well categorically. He said the entire many years, maybe 100 or so, of the Roman Empire, the amount of Christians who were killed is less than what one sect of Christians killed another sect in one night.
Right.
Right. But this victimhood is sold very well. And now you see no Roman pagans exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
And the Roman is all conquered by this victimhood only. So there's a book there are two books actually. One by Catherine Nixie, The Darkening Age.
Correct.
And another God Against the God by Jonathan. So this Jonathan's book, it actually talks about all these issues, how it is going on. Now, what is coming to today's age, right? If you go to 2013 or so, in a very premium US college in Pennsylvania, I think, then what happened that there is a spotting of Ku Klux Klan, this kind of attire, someone is going on. And there's a lot of sloganeering and everything going on, and how unsafe the right-wing, far-right groups have kind of hijacked the campus. It was actually found out the handiwork of some liberal students who actually took this attire, and actually this virtuous victimhood was kind of peddled so that they can accuse the conservatives of doing all the wrongdoing.
Wow. Right. Actually, I mean, I'm saying wow as a reflex, but this is not surprising at all, given what we saw in 2015, for example, with those broken church windows. The church windows are getting. You remember those stories?
I don't remember. Yeah.
You would have, of course, brushed your memory while writing the book. But they also did the same thing. That there is attack on churches, and no one really cares. I mean, in Delhi, there are so many churches. No one even recognizes churches. It's like, it's like that. It's not even a place where Christianity is a significant threat, right?
At least not in Delhi.
Yeah,
for the Hindus of Delhi, yeah.
So for them to even register that there is a church somewhere and that they are doing this conversion activity.
So basically, what it happens that they take the theory out of the playbook and try to enact the reality according to the theory.
Amazing. Yeah. So this kind of pins it down for us what really weaponization of victimhood means, and this also ties into what we were discussing earlier about this theory of there being structural violence against the minorities, and how that theory is then invoked to say that this is what this explains why the minorities are so charged up, right? Now, while critiquing the idea of majoritarianism or the theory of majoritarianism, you have come up with your own theory, which you call the linear theory of social evolution. Am I right?
Yeah.
LTSE.
Yeah.
So tell us more about what that is and yeah, then I'll ask the follow-up question.
So basically, no, first of all, we have to understand one thing. Reality is very complex. It cannot be ever explained, I think, by one theory, any theory. What I am trying to say that in this book is that my theory has far better explanation power than the majoritarian theory. That's all I am trying to say, right? Now, this linear theory is a sociological term of social change or social evolution. So the idea is basically something is scaled up, and it's scaled up linearly, it never suffers any drawbacks or something like that, and goes on forever. So the idea starts, and this is something that our Yuval Noah Harari he himself discussed. So he says before the Christianity came up, basically the world did not believe in any sort of like a linear theory, right? These ancient Chinese historians or Greek historians like Herodotus, they actually thought as this world is cyclical, like our Hinduism, right? You have this Sattva, Treta, Dapar, Kali, and then again Sattva, Treta, Dapar, Kali. Sometimes dharma will rule, sometimes adharma will rule, and all these sort of kind of ideas. Now, what happens in this theory, Christian theory? You know, Jesus is the first Christian. This political Christianity, I will say, and then this Christianity grows. Everybody becomes Christian linearly, right? It never goes down. And eventually judgment day happens, and then so everybody becomes Christian, right? So basically it is possible that Christianity is the right idea for a group of people, but they try to universalize that idea for the entire world. And they and in that idea of universalization, they don't care about anything else, and that's how it happens, right?
Okay.
This is the first aspect of my LTSE. The second aspect is it is not an academic theory, because if you don't believe in this theory, we'll otherize you, we'll treat you differently, we'll treat you as inferiors, and that's how we'll make people come to this kind of theory. So in my book I have also explained, while it is traced back to political Christianity, in the West political Christianity is almost dead. You see Rishi Sunak, right? He is the Tories, he is the leader. He is a Hindu, practicing Hindu. That actually shows a lot, right? But its offshoots, they are actually ruling the world, and most prominently it's the liberals. If you want a very layman way of understanding who has this LTSE, if someone says, I am the best because I am X, that's sort of like LTSE. I am the best because I am a liberal, right? If you ask, I mean, if I give an example, if you ask a general Christian or general Muslim, a lot of the time they won't say that. They won't say that I am the best because I am a Muslim. They say, well, we have to do right goods, right kind of karma, and that's why I am be good, right? But a liberal, I mean, if you go to the most prudent liberal, most a polished liberal, they'll say, yeah, I am the best because I am a liberal. You are not good enough. That's why you are not a liberal.
Right. So this idea of this linear progression towards better and better leads to individuals who believe that they are the best version of humanity and that others need to catch up, or they will be left behind.
Others need to catch up, yeah.
So this is,
and others' experiences are of no value. Their theory is the ultimate yardstone, right? Yardstick, sorry.
So this is like this is progressivism in some sense, isn't it?
Yes, this is progressivism.
Right. So what is the so is LTSE a form of progressivism then?
You might call it. I mean, what's in a name at the end of the day? But I have defined LTSE like these two characteristics.
Okay. Can you repeat those characteristics again?
One is basically the linear growth.
Okay.
And the second idea is otherization. Those who are not believing in, otherize them.
Okay. Right. Okay. Now, in applying this lens, you have categorized cultures into two different baskets: LTSE and non-LTSE. So LTSE cultures would include Islam, Christianity, communism.
I would say political Islam, political Christianity.
Political Islam. Okay. Now, just to digress a little, why that distinction? I mean, I think all Islam is political and all. I don't know.
The political, so this dimension is not mine actually, in a way. I have read this Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She has a very good book. It's called I think heretic, right?
Heretic.
The
Right.
heretic, yeah. So there she actually distinguished between Makkah Muslims and Medina Muslims.
Mhm.
Makkah Muslims are the majority. So these people are Muslims, but they sort of not really have a political vision or anything like that. They just do it in search of having a greater meaning in their life. It might help them as well. I know a lot of Muslims who are very good Muslims. Good Muslim in the sense that they believe in Islam,
Devout Muslim.
but they are very good persons as well. But this political Muslims or political Islam, whatever you call it, they actually don't believe in these rituals too much, or they don't really care about too much. Their idea is about this linear growth.
Right.
That's what it is about.
Right. So can I make the statement that at a certain scale, there might be a lot of individual Muslims, but when they form a community, that community automatically becomes political in nature because it's a bunch of people and it's not just individuals. And so it is LTSE by default then?
No, I wouldn't go so far. If you go to APJ Abdul Kalam, he has this memoir, right? And he has actually mentioned his father, who was a very kind of devout Muslim, but he used to kind of feed people and other things. So there are a lot of communities who actually had almost like a very normal human values and experiences without any political tones. And that was actually a problem for many political Muslims. And that's why they started this Tabligh Jamaat movement. So
Right.
basically to politicize them.
Correct. So in the same way, you make the claim in your book that the non-LTSE category consists of Hindus and other Indic traditions. Why is that the case?
So the idea, so basically this is a dilemma with all my Marxist friends or liberal friends. They say, well, you are taking this Islam and Christianity as religions and Hindus again a religion, you are putting in a different bucket. The problem is that Hinduism is a religion. This itself was a news to the Hindus in the 19th century. The Christian missionaries, they came to India and they have this theory of religion and they wanted to show that their theory or their religion is the best one. Now, if there is no religion in India, then whom would they compete? If they can't compete with anyone, they cannot tell people that, yours is the inferior stuff, come to our, our place, it's the superior stuff. They can't say that. So they had to create a religion, which is called Hinduism, right? And they kind of made a religion as they wished. So there is no real religion, and this is not my opinion. This is actually almost an understood academic opinion. Sri S.N. Bal Gangadhar, a very prolific academician from the Ghent University. He also occupied the chair of American Academy of Religion. He has actually given this opinion that Hinduism is not a religion at all. In my book also, I put a synopsis.
Okay. You also club Hindutva in the same category. Now that may be a little bit of stretch, don't you think?
Yeah, so of course. Now, the issue is actually Hindutva and Hinduism. Both words were coined in the 19th century itself. Hinduism by the Christian missionaries, but not all Hindus were comfortable with the definition of Hinduism, how it is actually the Indic tradition is kind of made a religion as they wished. And the resistance came from the Bengal because it is the seat of British Empire, right? And one person who actually wrote a book, Hindutva, it's called Essentials of Hindutva. The real history of Hindutva, the subtitle of the book was the real history of the Hindus. His name is Chandranath Bose. Chandranath Basu, that way he used to write, yeah. And it was again told by Rabindranath Tagore. I've given all the references. So basic idea is Hinduism is not an anthropocentric idea, or our Indic traditions are not an anthropocentric idea. Human beings are there, but just a part of the universe. They are not the focal point of the universe. In Christianity or any other religion, you will see the human beings as the focal point of the universe, and that's how the theory takes place. But in Hinduism or Indic traditions, I would say rather, it is not so, and that's how they kind of defined it. So in my book, I've discussed 3 strands of the Hindutvas. One is Chandranath Bose and Rabindranath Tagore tradition. I don't think anyone would have problem with this strand. Second goes to Savarkar's Hindutva, right? And then I actually quoted from his Savarkar's book. And I showed in this book, I demonstrated that Savarkar actually has not otherized Muslims or Christians.
Okay.
He acknowledged they are as good people as Hindus or Christians. There is no otherization. He actually talked about sometimes the actual reality. The reality in the sense of law. Law is different for Hindus and the Muslims, and that's what he kind of talked about. And even the manifesto of the Hindu Mahasabha, all human beings are equal, sort of things are there. You have to read the book to get the gist, but that's some substance of it. The third part of the third strand of Hindutva that I discuss is the RSS BJP kind. And here again, there is a lot of academic criticisms, Christopher Jeffrey Lott and others people. The problem is, we cannot take them as impartial and unbiased people because they are liberals. Because they are liberals, they have to put Hindus as a category of religions and as a bad idea, as a fundamentalism. So they are against it. And there are also critics of their approach by very, I would say, competent and capable and truthful people like Konrad Elst, we all know, and also Aravinda Nilakandan recently. So these are, but I didn't want to go into basically a very academic theoretical debate. Anyway, who knows what is the reality, right? So I actually looked at the real data. Real data, what does it do? So real data, if you look at the Nazis, right? Hitler came to power in the 1933, and Nazism is an LTSE, right? So immediately he took seize of the these Jews, and Einstein left, right? He went to Princeton and all these things, and then in 5 years or 6 years down the lane, genocide was happening. Now let's look at the data. So the BJP, so there's a lot of talk, right? If BJP comes to power, there will be genocide of Muslims in 1990s. And 1996 when Atal Bihari became Prime Minister for 13 days. So I remember that time that there's a sort of like world is coming to an end kind of phenomenon for many of them, right? But world did not come to an end, right, after all.
Yes.
So in 1998 they came to power again, 1999 they came to power and they ruled for 5 years. So and then again they came to power in 2014, 19.
And they will probably again come to power in 2024.
I'm an academician, I will pretend I ignore it. But the idea is, you see, the point is nothing has happened.
Yeah.
No genocide has happened. Muslim population proportion has not come down, but it has gone up all these years.
Yeah.
And if you look at the government policies, so number of scholarships, minority scholarships that are given only to minorities, not to Hindus. That proportion, that number has also gone up.
Correct.
It was, if I remember correctly, it is 2.94 crores when BJP came to power in 2014. Now it is 3.14 crores. So it has gone up. The amount of proportion of the amount of scholarship that has also gone up. The number of IS officers. You might say, well, it's an exam. What can they do? But it's a lot of fiber, right? You can put your own people and can put down things, and anything could be done. But again, the proportion of Muslims has only gone up. So nothing has actually happened. So, and those who kind of say doomsday, it is out of their moral sentiment. It is not out of any reality or anything like that.
So, just a small digression here to get more clarity on this. I would like to spend some time on this issue because it is more relevant to what we do at Upword also. How do you, now that you've probably spent so much time going through the archives and getting your concepts clear, how do you differentiate between the Hindu tradition and Hindutva?
So there is no reality. If you look at very carefully, Hindu tradition and Hindutva, there is no essential difference. Now, what happened when the Hinduism, so there is a lot of talk, right? We want Hinduism but not Hindutva. It is like that we want Judaism but not Zionism. So this kind of idea, right?
Right. It's very similar.
So essentially it boils down to an idea that religion is only individual centric.
Okay.
Right. So basically whatever is individual, that is Hinduism. Whatever is collective, that is Hindutva. But if you look at any tradition, any culture, those boundaries are very artificial. They don't exist at all, right?
True.
And anything is basically part of the society, community. And so therefore I don't believe in this division at all. And I see our traditions, this Chandranath Bose, Rabindranath Tagore, I think same continuation happened. That's what I have argued with Savarkar and also RSS BJP. So basically they try to see that a part of the collective or governance understanding of the society is left out. That's what they found when they defined Hinduism was defined. We were made to say that Western hegemony of governance is the only hegemony possible and you have to subscribe to it. They did not like it. They thought that they are taking our civilization away, our consciousness away. That's why they coined the term Hindutva. They said that we have a lot of to say with our collective life and governance. So definitely it is part of our tradition. I don't see any discontinuity.
No, but one would argue that when the Hindu Code Bill was passed, for example, at that time, Hindu rituals and the Hindu Niti Shastras, let's say, Dharma Shastras, and from there the policy framework and how to rule, and the crime and punishment, jurisprudence, law, all those things. Let's say a major chunk of that was just discarded, right?
Yeah.
Because of the changing times and things like that. And now we operate in an alien paradigm, which is basically an outcome of the Enlightenment era. And we are part of a liberal democracy. And in this liberal setup, in this democratic setup, Hindutva is our version of or our interlocutor with this new setup.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
That is sort of kind of...
So if that is the case, then Hindutva automatically becomes an ideology. And as an ideology, it is prone to the same kind of errors that you accuse, or if not accuse, but that you write about in terms of what
it is
LTSE
accusation, yes. It is accusation of
So
intolerance.
LTSE, for example. Now, Hindutva also, as an ideology, I think what the liberals do is they miss the wood for the trees as usual. And when they critique Hindutva, they think that Hindutva will turn against the Muslims or the Christians or whoever, minorities, because they operate in that majoritarian paradigm. They make all these stories up. But actually, Hindutva could turn against the Hindu tradition itself, arguably. Do you think that is a credible concern? If not, let's not be overly dramatic, but do you think that is...
No, I completely agree. So basically, any rigidification or frozen kind of theory is always a problem.
Right.
Now, if the Hindutva, they actually freeze the theory, that's the problem. And this is what I've argued in the last section of my book. So there are two kinds of worldviews. One is theory driven, where basically you make a very much a beautiful or ideal description of the world and you try to go there, which is mostly arguably all the LTSE ideologies are there. The other version is empirics driven. Right. So basically you take the feedback from the reality and you go on. Now, of course, you cannot separate the reality from the theory in a way, but it is mostly about the predominance. Whether the reality gives you feedback or you get more feedback from the theory. That's kind of what the idea of the distinction.
Right.
Now, in Indic society, it is mostly always basically you change you take feedback from the reality and you change yourself. So some people say, well, Hindus are the most sort of reformable religion. Because it's not a religion, we don't have a theory, right? We actually take feedback from the reality and we kind of suit our governance or collective living that kind of way. So of course it's a concern, but I don't see that is happening to us as long as we don't believe in a book kind of thing. The moment you believe in one kind of book and ideas, so I think the greater problem of the Hindus is basically if we really subscribe to the Western world very seriously, like there's a talk of constitutional values and all this kind of thing. You take these values as given, you can't change it. And then this is a problem actually.
Right. So, interesting that you brought this up about that part of your book where you talk about social identities. I would like you to elaborate a little more on that. What the structure of social identities that you've described. You briefly mentioned that. and which all thinkers or scholars have influenced your take on this matter?
So basically, the idea of the liberals they have that all cultures are sort of uniform or equal. This is contested in my book. I said intolerance depends on the culture. Now, if you look at this, the other phenomenon that cultures can be categorized, it comes from different sources. One is, of course, S.N. Balgangadhar, whom I mentioned already. And he actually he has a very seminal work, The Heathen in His Blindness, right? I have a summary book published in Praggata and also in this book.
Right.
So there he actually divided the cultures into two categories, that theory-driven and empiric-driven kind of thing. So basically, Christianity and its offshoots are all kind of theory-driven kind of framework. Well, Islam is also, many people think that Islam is also influenced by Christianity. In fact, one of the cousin, Prophet Muhammad's wife, Khadija, Warfa bin Nawfal, he was a educated Christian, and
I see.
he actually discussed with the Prophet when he did not obtain the Nabihood, all these issues.
Okay.
The other, so that's one way of looking at. There's he's one kind of stream, but there are other streams as well. One of the very famous American social thinker is Thomas Sowell.
Right.
And Thomas Sowell has a book, A Conflict of Visions, where he talked about two visions. One is called the constant vision, one is called the unconstrained vision. So constant vision is basically you cannot take your vision anywhere because there's a reality that is binding it, constraining it, right? So that is basically the empiric driven idea that I'm talking about. Unconstrained, you can know the elephants can fly kind of thing, which the liberals kind of sort of think. And this is very, actually we're laughing, but a lot of the people, so I'm a gray hair person now, but a lot of the people with the black hairs, they fall for this vision. Because they imagine they have to create a new world, right? And this is kind of going with them. And so that's what kind of we call it unconstrained vision. Another social thinker, this time not from Indic, not from right, libertarian. It is actually from the left. His name is Stephen Marglin. He was a Harvard-trained economist, and he has a book, The Dismal Science.
What is the name of the book again?
The Dismal Science.
Okay.
In this book, Dismal Science, he actually had a stint in India. And he found that the theories he were taught, economic theories, of course, in Harvard, they don't have any takers in India. I mean, in the classes, people nod because they need grades. I mean, students nod because they need grades, good grades, but they don't believe in it. So he actually was very serious. Why is it happening? And then he got two kinds of thinking, idea of two kinds of thinking. One kind is basically very algorithmic driven, theoretical thinking, right? The machine learning kind of thing, machine driven like. And the other idea is basically people kind of figuring it for oneself from their experience, for the community experience and feedbacks. So he basically concluded that the economics we usually teach in the universities, I also teach, so that has a big problem. It actually talks about an individual, where the individual is only a construct. There is no such thing as individual. We all kind of live in a very assimilated reality. And he kind of talked about this idea in his book, and he talked about the other kind of thinking, which is experience-driven thinking, but basically the same idea.
Right. So, in empiric-driven social systems, you talk about Jaatis, right? And the caste question again comes up. Now, how do you reconcile this tirade, day in and day out, the tirade against Jati or caste, birth-based professions, with your view of that being a more empirical or more reality-based system?
So the idea of the Jati or caste, for example, it's a very, I mean, I will need another session with you on this completely, of course, at least. But I'll give you the brief story. The idea of the Jati is basically believe in some experiential level governance, where you don't believe in a very uniform sort of humanity of all having the same kind of abilities or same kind of domain expertise. So, and there basically you have autonomies among different groups of people or communities. So, these are called Jatis, right? Jatis will have their own social vision, one social code of conducts and all these kind of things. And there is nothing wrong with that. And the problem comes from our so-called tirade against Brahminism, because people sort of assume the Brahmins were the most prosperous class. It is not the case at all. Brahmins were the most poormost class. Actually, the Megasthenes Indica, they are mention of 7 Jatis. The first one we can identify with the Brahmins, so who are kind of philosophers and kind of thing. And it is written by Megasthenes. This is like 2,300 years ago from today, right? That world. The other Jatis, they don't really accept people, right? If you are a jeweler, you will not really want to have another jeweler coming in, suddenly increasing your competition. But philosophers, they had no problem of having another philosopher in that domain.
More the merrier.
More the merrier. So basically, the Brahmins were not a sort of the sort of the dominant people. That's a very, very false understanding. It comes from Christian description of the medieval India. I will skip it short because I have to keep it, tone down things in time. But the other thing is, of course, if you go to even Mahabharata, if you go to the Sambar of Panchali, Draupadi, right? So essentially, 2 Brahmins, one Brahmin won the Sambar, the Arjuna, but he was disguised as a Brahmin when he actually did that thing. And because if you were really the privileged class, people should be celebrating Kshatriya marrying a Brahmin, right?
Correct.
But you saw the other way around. The kings got very angry. I mean, how are you kind of a Brahmin you are giving your daughter to, right?
Right.
So basically, the priests were like, I would say like my allusion to my profession, professors. Professors today are respected, but really the world doesn't run around the professors, right? It runs around the businessman, I would say.
True.
Or political leaders, right?
Yeah. True. So coming to the last part of your book also, which talks about the solution to the problem of this complete takeover of the discourse and politics by the majoritarian myth. What are the solutions that you offer in practical terms?
So basically, the discourse is now basically dictated by some Western terms, right? Equality, fraternity, these kind of terms. Now, these are very problematic terms in itself because these are very theoretical. I'll give an example. It will be easier. So, I have some liberal friends who day in and day out, they talk in favor of equality. I am probably the only person who says, well, equality may not be exactly what you see in real life. Now, when you say equality, they say in a very abstract sense. I mean, they themselves, they have a lot of money. They go do foreign trips every year. They flaunt it as a status symbol or something like that. But they see it's no violation of equality, right? I mean, not of course everybody is going to foreign trip even in entire life, right? But that's not, they don't see as a problem because this idea of equality is a very theoretical idea. You don't need to really do anything for that, right? So we have to actually bring in empirical ideas. And I would say one thing, we actually Indians, we have it from our very tradition. In Mahabharata, there is a talk of Satya and Ahimsa as 2 guiding principles of human life. And both of them have to be practiced. Satya means you have to speak the truth. You cannot mollycoddle or something like that and you say something else. That's not truth, right? We don't understand that way at least. So then, so basically if you want to upload truth, you have to say truth, right? Or avoid at least telling lies, which is challenging, which is not easy, right? Ahimsa, you cannot really do anything. We cannot really take meat every day and say you are the most peace-loving person. I mean, that's not how it works, right?
Right.
Yeah, you have to do the sacrifice from your daily life, right? Experience. And this understanding of Mahabharata was passed down. Buddha Dev, he talked about Pragya and Karuna, which is basically his own versions of Satya and Ahimsa. I mean, Gandhiji, many people I know, in young people, they are not comfortable with his politics. I also have one's view of it. But I would say he was a good teacher. He actually wanted to talk to Indians in Indian terms. He did not want to import the Western framework to India and create a lot of new problems. So he actually said that, no, let's do these things of Satya and Ahimsa. And I'm saying the same thing. All our social policies should be based on Satya and Ahimsa. Then all the problems will be solved. So, for example, if you look at this idea of the equal proportionality in different jobs, right? That's a problem. Why? Because we really believe in equality in some sense, right? Equality from birth or something like that. Now, of course, that's not a very practical principle, because that way the economy becomes stagnant if you really implement that idea in a real sense of the term, right? But if you go for the area of ahimsa, you have to see that the people who are really suffering in life for some reason, they are getting the fair chance or something like that. But you don't need to go for all the way to really perfect equality so that things become problematic in life, right?
Right.
And similarly, this freedom of expression, right? Freedom of expression, again, we have a problem. People say, well, freedom of expression, can you really say hatred, preach hatred and all these things? Again, the idea of Satya and Ahimsa will be very important. You have to speak whether this person is speaking the reality, Satya, and is he really going against his preaching Himsa?
Yeah. No, I think that distinction that you've this brought in between LTSE and non-LTSE cultures is very consequential and very important, because while the idea itself, when you read it, it looks fairly straightforward, but it is often ignored. Like you said before the interview, that this is the elephant in the room, and you are only pointing to that elephant. And it reflects in more than one context and in multiple ways, in things which seem unrelated to each other but are connected. Like we know, we live in an interconnected universe anyway.
Yes.
It's not that what we cannot see, what is not apparent, does not necessarily mean that there is no connection. More often than not, there is a connection which we don't see. Similarly, the effect of this LTSE thinking on just the development of technology now, and maybe we can conclude with this. This slightly goes beyond the scope of the book also, and maybe it will set the tone for our next conversation sometime. But when we look at technology and the way it is going, I think humans generally, and especially in this age, have the big problem before them of defining limits. And somehow, in any domain, in any area of life, it is this defining of limits that misses us. We don't really understand how to define limits. And this plays out most insidiously in the case of technology, because now technology is growing exponentially, and it is making such leaps that we are already out of the picture. We don't have control over where it is headed. And similarly with the economics also, this infinite growth based model. So do you think that bringing in this distinction, LTSE versus non-LTSE thinking, I'm not just limiting it to cultures, this is critical for our survival as a species itself? Do you think that is a valid claim to make?
So I see a lot of similarity between LTSE and the idea of adharma. So adharma means it's an unsustainable reality. And if you go to these LTSE universes, there is a judgment day there.
Right.
So in their also intellect, they cannot actually conceive of a very kind of a harmonious universe. They have to kind of end it, right, someday.
Right.
And this idea, dharma, is more of a sustainable universe, right? Now, what is happening now? We have lost our purpose. There is a pursuit of happiness we are all trying to follow. And this is a Protestant Christian framework. And this framework, what we are doing, we are actually doing a lot of atrocities on the other animals, other creatures, right? Because we live in a very anthropocentric world.
Right.
And that is actually in turn going against us, because we are getting the loss of balance and other things, right? Another COVID, another things it's a matter of time only, right? Now, to do that, to change it, we have to change the idea of our human purpose. It is not really the purpose. The purpose is not pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of you have to grow. You just because you are born human, you have not accomplished anything. That's what our Shastra says. You have to become a Buddha. You have to become a Shiva, right? So you have to develop the inner qualities in you. The moment we will do this pursuit, our over-reliance of pursuit of happiness based on technology and exploitation of excessive resources will go down. And that will eventually make the survival of our civilization possible. So it is all connected world. The moment we take this idea of sustainability does not lie in going from fossil fuel to battery driven. That's not the way it works. It works that we have to understand it mentally. That's what the Tagore said, that tame your inner demon, and that's how you will make a very kind of a very I'll say green world. That's how it kind of works.
No, but the problem with this line of thinking, if I may say so, is that it appears all nice and good, but then no one really does it because there is no incentive to do it. So this is the final question now. Do you think that a return to tradition or the discourse of traditionalism is relevant?
So I think one thing, I think there is a myth. That's what the word myth comes in my book. People have a myth, and this myth only changes when there is a civilizational collapse, partially or fully, right? So for example, people had a myth in Western world of Bible, that Bible is the ultimate authority, right? And then when they saw that basically the Newtonian mechanics and other things are doing things, and biblical worldview is going to very much conflict, so they changed, right? From that myth, a new Enlightenment era started, right? Similarly, this is the myth now, that we will do all fine by pursuit of exploitation of nature and everything. So we need some collapses. We need some mini collapses, unfortunately. I mean, and after that, probably we have to set the myth again. And that time we might be able to set this myth. Yeah. But we need to have the groundwork before. So that.
But do you think that going back to the tradition in some sense, and again, this has been demonized and caricatured, this the traditionalism itself has been caricatured by the so-called liberals in such a bad way that they will accuse people of saying that, oh, you are actually saying that, oh, you stop using electricity. It's not that. Tradition is something which is profound, which is deep. And reconnecting with the tradition is the answer to a lot of the problems that we face, cognitively even, to even make sense of the world.
So problem is, we live in the world made by the liberals. So in their theory-driven world of progressivism, the new versions are always better.
Right.
But it was not so before.
Right.
Before, we used to live in a world where old version used to be considered better because they survived the test of time, right?
Right.
So I unfortunately have to say that one same thing. The liberal worldview will only exist so long there is no big natural disaster, there is no big war or all these things. The moment it happens, then we will enter a new myth, and then India has a chance to set the tone for the whole world.
Right. So I think we will end here, and I would urge our viewers to buy this wonderfully written book, The Majoritarian Myth by Kausik Gangopadhyay. Thank you very much for spending time with us and answering so many, I don't know if they were all relevant questions to the material you've written here, but thanks nonetheless, and we hope to see you again. For the viewers, we will also come out with an animated video on the main ideas of the book with Kaushik ji presenting, and that will also come very soon after this interview is published. Thank you very much. Thank you.